Hey, welcome everybody to Pianist Academy in another live stream Q&A, Masterclass, a Q&A session. It's going to be an exciting one. So hello, I see we have Rhodesy here already, and Sparrowhawk there, welcome. Antonio, welcome, and Bunny Hollow. Becky, I am, hello. I was running late today, so I don't even have my coffee. It's going to be a water-only kind of stream, which is a little sad. But here we are. So we're going to jump right into things because I got two really great requests via email over the last 2 weeks. Hey, is it Tan? Welcome. Awesome. So yeah, we're going to jump right into things. First off, Rhodesy sent in a piece of an original piece of music for a little bit of discussion. So we're going to take a look at that first, and then I'm going to jump to a question I got from Craig. That's going to be a relatively short one, and then we'll open it up to Q&A about whatever anybody wants to talk about. I hope that sounds good. Great. Does it seem like the camera today, is it too bright? Is everything just like exploding in brightness? Let me know. I can jump off camera and change that very, very fast if that's a problem. Welcome, Dith, and welcome, James. Awesome. Welcome. So let me pull up. So Becky says it all looks good. Great. Hello, Craig. Welcome. Awesome. From England. Beautiful. So we have one comment about the picture. If anybody else has a problem, just type it in the chat, and I will make a quick fix. And otherwise, we'll just keep going. It is live, after all, right? Antonio, tiny bit bright, but Antonio, you work in the movies. So Alex, hello, Alex. You know what? Let me just fix the brightness because it's going to bother me as I keep looking over at the screen. So give me 2 seconds. Then we're going to jump into Rhodesy's original music, a Rondo in D major. Okay. Whew. Okay. I think that'll be a little bit better for everybody. Okay, great. So here's what we're going to do. I took a little bit of time before the stream today to kind of get familiar with this piece because it is 14 pages long. I don't know if we're going to quite get through the whole thing, Rhodesy, but we're definitely going to have a good chat about it. And I'm going to show you the score from my iPad, and I'm going to let the computer recording play, and then I'm going to dive in and do a little bit of playing of it myself as we chat about it. So here is Rhodes's Rondo in D major. Okay, we're gonna stop it there, Rhodesy. And by the way, I saw you in the chat first thing right even before we started the stream. Let me know if you're still here because I have questions for you. So first of all, let's give Rhodesy a round of applause. We're always talking about performances here, but writing music is a wonderful accomplishment. So yeah, let's drop some applause in the chat for Rhodesy. Becky is very impressed. Beautiful. So, Rhodesy, if you're still here, my first question for you. When I teach composition, I ask a lot of questions because I like to do less telling and more kind of guiding and creative directions. So hopefully you're still here to answer some of these questions. And if you're not, if you watch the replay, they'll be there for you to answer in your own time. First of all, what is the purpose of the composition? Obviously, it's a rondo. For those of you that don't know that are here, a rondo is a specific form in music. It's A, B, A, C, A. That means each of those letters is a particular set of musical content, right? So if we go back to, for example, the first page here, the A section of this piece begins, there we go, begins at the top and ends at the repeat sign. There it is. So that is our A section. This is kind of functioning like a little interlude. And then the B section, I'd say, begins here. So we have an A and a B, at least on the first 2 pages. And then the A section will continue to come back repeatedly over and over again throughout the piece. There we go. Okay, so that's what that form means. A, B, A, C, A. That's rondo form. So the A section comes back 3 times, and it's usually, it can either be repeated exactly the same as it was or varied slightly. We actually didn't even finish the B section on our listen through. The A section would come back a few pages later for the 2nd time. Okay, so that's rondo form for everybody that didn't know that in particular. So Rhodesy, the first question is, why choose rondo? And then why did you choose D major? And why have you chosen your particular melodic content that opens the piece? Whoops, let's try that again. That's up to the first fermata. So why choose this? You could have a lot of answers. It could be you were inspired to write that. It just came out of your hands like that. Or it could be you could have put more thought into it than that in particular. Let's start with a couple technical things because I'm not sure if you're still here, but I'll give you a chance to answer those if you are. And we'll go over to some more creative stuff as we go through the technical aspects. So looking at the first page, in a typical 3/4, we're going to see the bass note, and this is kind of a waltz form. We're going to usually see the bass note on beat 1. And here it's all been written on beat 3. And based on the playback and based on just experiencing it myself, to me those first 2 notes sound like they want to be a fermata. And then this where the triplet happens, right there, should be beat 1. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah? And I even bring that up because when we look down at measure 6, 7, 8, 9, over here, it is lined up. Hey, Rosie's back. Or here. Let me see what happened here. So I bring that up because starting in measure 9, we do get everything lined up on downbeat. Yeah? So I would think, unless you're really, you have an intention behind offsetting the beginning of this by a quarter note, and if you might, let us know. If you have that intention of putting this on beat 3 here, that's one thing. But it will change how we accent, how the player accents the music. Yeah? Rhodesy asks, is the harmony good on it? I have a couple comments on the harmony, and my first overarching one is, yes, it's good. And 2, great job, actually, not allowing the harmonic components to get too complicated. Most often, what I see in my composition students is that we want to tell a lot of things very quickly. And so over the years that I've taught composition, that's the primary thing that I end up working on with students is spacing ideas out. Almost like writing variations on them, because there's so much that sometimes gets presented in 8 measures or 16 measures, and really everything that someone has come up with could be the content for an entire piece of music. So I think you've done a great job at, I'm going to call it limiting, but it's not in a negative way. We have a limited harmonic vocabulary, but it serves a great purpose. So that's really, really good, actually. I always get worried if I see a student composition or any kind of composition, and oh yeah, Rosie, no worries. That's why we're doing this. I would love to take you on as a private student, but Yeah, you need a keyboard. That's going to be much more important. Greetings, Scott. Oh, by the way, greetings, Seth. I didn't get to say hello. So I love that it isn't so complex. I get worried when a student comes in and they bring in a piece and it's got diminished harmony everywhere, and some of the ideas aren't real clearly put together. It's kind of an exploration of how complicated can it be made. So I like that about the harmony. Let's go back to the little bit of talk that we were having about offset of beats. And this might be purely a notational thing. So back here on page 1, when we begin the piece, if this is really beat 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, the accent in 3/4 is always on beat 1. So if we want the bass note in the first iteration to be not accent, I'm of course playing it with exaggeration, more exaggeration than would be musical, but just to show you, based on the notation, that's where the accents fall. Yeah? So Rosie says you add the bass when it comes back to the natural. Yeah, I think I know what you mean. So I would, because it's written on the beat here in measure 9, I would question if you also intended the first 2 notes to be fermatas. We'll put them underneath, even though they're supposed to be on top. Fermata, fermata on beat 2, 3, and then beat 1. Right? I ask that because it makes a whole lot of sense harmonically and to the pianist who might be reading this, if those are shifted to beat 1. When they're not on beat 1, even though it's all the same notes, because it doesn't fit the let's say the pattern that we're used to sight reading or seeing, it looks really confusing. So 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. You can see when I switch my thinking, just how much more easily I can sight read it by that one notational change. Yeah? So hopefully that's what you meant. So because of the software playback, you said. So I would still try to consider if you can add a partial bar in the software, or just start it with a 2/4 bar instead of 3/4 and play 1, 2, and then shift our downbeat over 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Yeah? And then it'll also make sense with what you've done in measure 9 after that. Okay, so Rhodesy, can you answer, there are a couple questions I asked, I'm not sure you were here before, but can you answer a couple questions about why you picked rondo form, and why you picked D major, and why you wrote this melody? Yeah. Let's see, so you're saying interpretation when the theme returns at a bit of an accent on the lower D. I don't see a lower D. I'm only seeing D's in the middle of the... Are you talking about that one in the left hand? Yeah. That one. Okay. That's fairly implied by putting it on the downbeat there. If you want it brought out even more than that, I'd put an accent mark or a tenuto or something else, because otherwise it's going to be, unless you have a chance to talk to someone, they're probably not going to interpret any larger accent than a typical accent given in the 3/4 time. So if you want just the typical bum, where it's slightly bigger than beat 2 and beat 3, then it's fine. If you want something more than that, put it in the score, for sure. So after the fermato, if you want something more like that, put an accent, for sure. Let's see, you said you did it as a challenge, and the melody came out of your head this way. And it would have been an E flat major, but the sketch was too complicated. Okay. Cool. So I like that. I like that. I think, Rhodesy, I think that the A section overall is my favorite throughout the entire piece, as I listened through the whole piece and as I looked at everything. And let's one more technical thing. Let's jump into the B section and the kind of the interlude leading into the B section. So I think you can see all of this on the screen. The interlude begins at the bottom here, and then B starts on the next page. You don't have a problem changing time when we get to the andante cantabile down here in measure 29, but this feels like this should be in 2/4, especially because of your left-hand figures. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah. Oh, the B section technically is the andante cantabile. Okay. That's good. Let me see. Okay. I can get behind that since this never really comes back again, as far as I can tell. Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. So we'll change that. So still what I said still stands in that I think this should be in 2/4. This. Same reason that we talked about the offset and beat in the 3/4 section earlier in the piece. If we do this in 2, it makes a lot more sense, I think. Okay, next question. Why in measure 29, so now, well, including these 16ths, why have you chosen the 16th pattern, and why have you, let's say in measure 29, why is it so active? What goal is it accomplishing for you? Especially at the tempo you've written, which is 137 is really quite allegro. And to answer your question, it seems like you take a lot of inspiration from Chopin. So I'm gonna that's my primary answer for you. Some of the various little cadenza-like passages, yeah, that's what I hear. So Rhodesy, why have you chosen those couple things? Why the 16th notes? And then why is there so much going on in measure 29? Yeah. We'll give Rhodesy a chance to answer that first. Okay, I'll keep going then, since your Wi-Fi is acting up. So the question was, in measure starting in the interlude, or the bridge to the B section, where we have the very active left hand. What is the purpose of all of that, musically speaking? Why are there 16ths? And so that's the first question. Second question is, in measure 29, what purpose does the combined left hand, which is very active, and combined with the right hand, what purpose are they serving? What is the musical goal of that style of writing? And all of the notes that you've chosen to put down. Things feel so strange just having water, and I'm going to finish it so fast. I miss my coffee. We'll give Rosie another little bit to see if we can answer the question. And if your Wi-Fi crashes again, I'll just continue on. Okay, so the B section, you said the B section left hand should sound basically non-existent. So from a technical, let's see, the B section, which is this, you mean? Yeah. Okay, and one is a challenge for the left hand, then the bridge. Okay. As composers, I think we should always have a goal of writing what we intend to say with the fewest notes that we need. If notes aren't necessary to be written down, we shouldn't write them. And you can see that any of the great composers, if you look at any of the great composers' music, they have no qualms about writing bars that are very thin and sparse when necessary, and they have no qualms about writing bars that have a tremendous amount of notes in them either. We see both, right? But behind that, there's a reason why all of the notes exist to begin with. So at the tempo you've chosen, what will happen is, for a performer, let's say, in measure 21, to play it at that tempo and to play it very quietly, you have just written like a level 10, 11, or 12 passage for the left hand. That is going to take just about anybody on the planet some considerable practice to really get it. To get it right. And if we want to bring out the upper notes you've written, because we have then bum, 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 bum. Yeah? Well, okay, even if the bridge can be loud, okay, that maybe takes a couple notches off. We'll call it a level 10 instead of 11 or 12. But it's still going to be very difficult for just about everybody. And so if it doesn't serve a purpose of, this is very, very, let's say, exciting and building and coming to a climax in a sense, if it's not supposed to serve that purpose, I would question, why have all of those notes? I mean, people that have been here on the streams know that I sight read a huge amount of stuff live. And it's really only the really, really top, most difficult stuff that I can't read on a single playthrough. So if you're going to write something that's that challenging, let's make sure, as you say, false climax to excite, and then calm down on the andante. I would still ask, can we do it with eighth notes instead of 16ths here? Eighth notes in dynamic. Or some 16ths, but not measure after measure after measure full of them, because we have to balance. Thanks, Dith. We have to balance what we're writing against really who is going to play it. This is a conversation that I have with comp students in college. I wouldn't be able to see an updated score today, Rhodesy, no. But yeah, definitely. I don't think you should change anything in this piece. You've completed it. We're just having a discussion about it, and we can use knowledge and apply it to the next time. And that's really the purpose. So, Rhodesy, if we're talking about, let's say, the bridge to the B section. Okay. So, even something like that. So I'm playing these first 4 16ths leading to here, and then this is just becoming a quarter note, no 16th. And then the next 4 leading to the downbeat becomes a quarter, no 16th. Yeah, so then we're still getting an opportunity to hear our turnaround. But we've also eliminated the piece that takes this from, let's say, like level 7 or 8 and bumps it to being extraordinarily hard. So if there's not a purpose for that extraordinary difficulty, this is something I might suggest. Something like that. It still provides excitement. We still get that forward momentum, yeah? But we've made it, in a sense, a little bit more pianistic and a little more attainable for a lot more people to play. Okay. Oh, thanks. So that's one idea. You're the composer. It's always in your hands. I'm just suggesting things that just to think about and to think about in the future. So we're going to have a quick chat about composition and performing, especially because Rhodesy, I took a look through all of the pieces you've written. I didn't look through all of them, but I looked through the list and I picked out a couple and looked. You've been writing a lot of music. Feel free, if you'd like to, you can drop a link either in the chat or in the comments below the video. I will definitely leave it up there since we've spent a considerable amount of time on your work. If you'd like other people to go check it out, you can drop a link in the comments. That might be an easier place once the stream is over. Okay, so this is great. I love the last thing that you said here, and we're going to tie that into another part of our discussion. Why do we have a need to write something difficult? Yeah? We could say, oh, we could be proud of that or something like that, of course. Yeah? Musically, why? That's my question. Why does it need to be difficult? Because we can say a lot of, okay, well, you made a bet with your friend. Well, that's a good reason. Hopefully you won. Something that I feel like I've said to comp students, especially university level comp students, over the course of my life performing. This is going to be something maybe a little hard to hear. There might be even some people that disagree with it. There definitely will be some people that disagree with it, and that's okay. When we write music, I think part of our goal is to have people play it. We don't want it to just kind of sit, and at least for us, at least one person, us, the composer and the performer, we'd like to be able to play it. Okay, so we can write something that is attainable, 1, for that goal. 2, as you think about the greater population of people who are going to play music and potentially play your music, the harder something gets, the drastically smaller that population becomes. It's easy to find communities online where there might be 100,000 people or something that are playing at a pretty considerable high level, But when we take those 100,000 people and say, well, that's the entire world, or that's all of the people in the world that are maybe capable of this, that's a relatively small number. And how many of those people are going to choose? This is the really hard part. And it makes me a little sad. But I feel this as a composer too. How many people are going to choose to play your work over Chopin's? And I fight this battle all the time because I write a ton of music and I want people to play it. But there's some incredible competition, and people as humans, we only have a limited amount of time in the day to learn something and to perform something. Or if we even have performances, we only have a limited number of programs we can put together, etc. So there have been a tremendous number of new music performances that I have turned down because the level of difficulty of the piece combined with the fact that I'd probably only be able to perform it once in my life don't make sense to me as a performer and as a professional performer, as someone that makes a living doing it. So I need to spend my time learning music that I'm going to get to reuse and recycle and play a lot. It seems like there's a big push in music school and academia to let the performer figure out how to play it. I've even been told that by some graduates of programs, that they're taught in comp school to, just write and then give it to the performer and they'll figure it out. So I really, really disagree with that. And as someone that writes, I spend maybe half my time writing music. I always have an ear and an eye and a feel for how many people are going to be able to perform this, because I don't want to write music that's just going to go out and sit and never be played again. And unfortunately, I think the vast majority of comp students, 99% of their work that they're going to university for is never going to get played again after that degree recital where they bring on a bunch of students to play that work. And part of the reason is what we're talking about, is the technical challenge. Rhodesy, I wouldn't say this is as hard as the Fourth Ballade or any of the ballades of Chopin. It's not like that. It's difficult. But the piece, the component that I'm missing, that I'm not seeing, is the underlying reason for it. So if we want to write something that's just massive and it requires hands to be flying around the piano, we better make a massive emotional impact. That's part of the beauty of the four ballades of Chopin, when they are the pinnacle of difficulty, which they aren't for the whole piece, right? But when they reach for that and strive for that, they make one of the most massive emotional statements in all of the repertoire. That's why Chopin is a master composer. That's why he's a genius. Could he sight read this? Absolutely not. I would put lots of money on him not being able to sight read this. Even though he was a great interpreter, genius. Yeah, hello, Jeffrey. There's a lot of notes. And so I think that's the biggest thing I'd like to encourage you with is, okay, we had a reason for writing this and it was a bet. Great. And I'm glad you won and you made some money. That's awesome. If you wanted to write a revision of it, absolutely leave this one alone. And then like what Rachmaninoff did with the Second Piano Sonata. There was an original version and Liszt would get it. To sight read? Probably not. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know of any human alive that would be able to sight read it first read, or even play it after a day. And that I'm including like Trifonov and Yuja Wang and Martha Argerich. I've had the pleasure of meeting Martha actually. I really don't think. That would not happen. That's the challenge of the piece. Yeah. There are stories about Martha being able to play a concerti from reading the score alone, but that would be, she'd have hours with it. Even though they weren't at the piano, she'd spend hours and hours and hours sight reading alone. Yeah? So going back, yeah, Rachmaninoff wrote the second sonata, and then 20 years later, he wrote a revised version. And the revised version is, I mean, saying it's easier is all relative. If it's level 12, it becomes, let's say the first version is high level 12 and the second is low level 12. They're both incredibly challenging. But the reason why a lot of people are tending to play the revised version and not the original, I think it was 1913, anymore, is because it's just much more compositionally sound. The difficulties, the extreme difficulties are presented when they match the emotion that needs to be present. And then they're made much simpler, including passages, arpeggiated passages, which, you know, we're in D, so I'm just playing around in D. Rachmaninoff writes a lot of arpeggios, right, that come up and around and circle and they're very unique to his style. And in the revised sonata, he changed them in a sense, a lot like what I just advised you to do. Instead of being this constant flow of arpeggios that changes on every beat, he changed them to have little pauses that allow the hand to regroup and perform more easily. Yeah? And there's proof in the pudding. A lot of the great pianists of yesterday played the original, probably because it's what they grew up with. And just about everybody today plays the revised. And it's not because a technique is not as good for those pianists. I mean, there's great argument to be made that, you know, Rubinstein and Horowitz and Arau, all those pianists, right? They had fantastic technique. They were natural pianists. We could even say that because of medicine, science, right, understanding of physiology, technique has even improved since then. Yet, people still don't go back and play the original version. So I think there's a big lesson to be learned from that. Yeah. Okay, one other comment, Rotzi, and then I want to move on to Craig's question that he emailed in, and then we got to get to an open Q&A for everybody. One other comment. I would love to see, I mentioned right at the beginning of our talk that I think the harmonic vocabulary is great because it's smaller and it's condensed, and it doesn't just, you know, you're not trying to blow our mind with harmony. We're sticking to some things that work really, really well, and they're voiced really, really well, yeah? So I really like a lot of that. I would encourage you, especially when we get into the B section and the C section, that can we show a little bit more variation in harmony? So that in the B section, we're not so focused anymore on D. So we get a little bit of movement to B minor, right? Or we could even call it, it almost doesn't sound like B minor because of the pedal tone. That still sounds like D in inversion, not F sharp. So some of those places you might consider where you've changed the inversion, maybe we could change the harmony. Not everywhere, but throw in something once in a while so that, let me show you instead of just talking. So first bar of the B section, that's great. I wouldn't do anything with that. Now we have a small variation. I wouldn't change that either. This is measure 30, next bar. Sorry. I wouldn't change that. Maybe when we get here, and this the first introduction of a group of 7. There, I might change harmony to be a little bit more different, so that it doesn't feel like we're continuing to play over basically a D pedal tone, and then that changes to inversion and inversion. But if we change, And that could also, when you start to hear that and explore that, it might open up some different doors as well for how you'd like to proceed from there. Since we're on this page, one other quick comment. Always be sure when you're notating something, when you get the idea down, put it down however you need to, right? But when we have this, we need to show, for the performer's sake, we need to show the beat division, which means we really should try to decide how this is divided between the beat, the group of 7. I know that changes a little bit of the performance of it. But yeah, I'm struggling to think off the top of my head of an example where the group doesn't begin on a beat. This is offset. And then also does not end on a beat. Even if we call the next note the ending of that passage, it's still not on a beat. I can think of a lot of Chopin and Liszt where the cadenza-like figure or a little running passage starts on the beat and then moves around. But not starting on a beat is very foreign. And you'd find a lot of people will struggle. One, I mean, of course, to play 7 against 1, 2, 3, 4, against 4 or 5, yeah, that's its own difficulty. That's not impossible. It just takes feeling it the right way. But getting that group of 7 against 4 in the middle, in between beats, makes it very, very, very challenging. So, is there something that we can gain from shifting it over to start on the beat? Or if you're really intent on that being there, gosh. That's really hard, because I'd really like to see a better division, notational division, because it aids in sight reading. Yeah. So you asked for one more thing about the climax at the end of the piece. Can you give me a bar number that starts on? And then we'll jump over to Craig's question. $129, great. Oh, hello, Internet Privacy. Good to see you. Here we go. So, Rhodesy, does it start in 129? That seems like the end of an A section. And then 132 feels more like a coda or like a climax. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Jen. I appreciate it. Actually, so this is interesting because I'd say all of this is going to be easier than what you've written earlier in the piece. These little alternating figures, even though the leaps are large, that's just going to take a little bit of practice. And actually, not for a very advanced player, not a ton of practice. For the same reason that we kind of talked about earlier. Despite these being very fast jumps and large jumps, you're giving the hand a break. So it's more pianistic in a sense. So I'll play it a little more slowly. So that's just going to take a little practice because we have points later on, yeah? And the octave stuff, yeah, so... I'm not going to sight read all of this, but it's cool that you've interwoven some of that theme in both parts. Dun, dun. That's nice. And that's still not going to be all that hard, including the ending. Let me play that bar better for you. Right? So a lot of times octaves are thought of as like advanced technique, especially fast ones. But you've been here with me the whole time. You can see that's way easier to sight read, and it's very, very quickly, immediately in the hand. Even where the parts are joined. The little grace note in 138, that makes it a little more challenging. But overall, that's not actually as hard as the stuff that you've written earlier. Like, actually, even starting all the way back in the bridge to the first B section, all of this. Not all the bars are hard, but the leap and the change in direction is more challenging, believe it or not. And then in the Andante Cantabile, that left hand's not bad. Just getting a little bit of the changes memorized. But starting in measure 38, down here, that is going to be harder than the coda at the end of the piece, for sure. Let's see, you can assist left hand in the bridge with your right hand. Playing melody, 4, 5. So there you go. Here's another example. If you'd like a pianist to do that, and if you perform it that way, I would notate it that way. Otherwise, it would take talking to the composer to learn something like that. So we have this interaction right now, and that's awesome. But if you don't have that interaction with someone, they're going to play it the way it's written and the way the hand divisions are written. Yeah? Hey, you got a compliment from Internet Privacy Advocate, Rhodesy. That's huge. He doesn't give those out freely. All right, I really appreciate it. For those of you here, especially if you've been here the whole time, give Rhodesy a round of applause because this has been a really neat dive into composition and other things. That we don't normally do here. So that's been fun. And I want to get over to Craig's question, and then we'll open it up for a bit of Q&A. Thanks, Becky. Hello, Backwards fellow. Is Craig still here? I know that he was in attendance earlier. This is going to feel like such simple music now, but we're going to change and shift gears. Awesome. Bethany, welcome, Bethany. Seth, Donna, welcome. All right. Okay. So Craig had a question. He sent in a piece of music, some Andrew Lloyd Webber. And it was, I think, really a question about, OCD King is here. Welcome. Didn't see you in the chat earlier. Okay, thanks, Rhodesy. James, I'm glad. Okay, so Craig's question, I think, stems around notation again. Possibly some fingering choices. So, Antonio, I love it, yeah. Okay, so Angel of Music by Andrew Lloyd Webber. Let me see. There's the beginning, and now we have a little interlude at the bottom of the first page. We have some highlighted notes there. And then more. Cool. Okay, so the oh, definitely, Rhodesy, it'll definitely. All of my streams from the very first one, they're all up here, so it'll stay up here forever. So Craig's question is about these highlighted notes, starting last bar of the first page. Why are there two notes that share the same pitch? And why are they in different stems? And why are they in different hands? So Craig, this all has to do with showing voicing in voicings or voicing in a piano part. In something like this, let's say the idea of showing voicing, which is, let's say, stem up, stem down, to make it as simple as possible, partly stems from Baroque writing like Bach, where he wrote, let's say, fugues, right, in 3 voices, 4 voices, 5 voices. And in order to show in notation what each of the individual voices are doing, we have to have stems going in different directions. So that's a little bit of where this stems from. Also, anytime we take a piece of music, especially if it's not originally written for piano, which is the case here, and then we translate it, transcribe it, or rearrange it for piano. It's for piano players with all thumbs, yes. Whenever we redo that, there's a lot of times that the arranger wants to continue to show voice leading that's present in the original orchestration. So in a case like this, we're going to have, I'm not going to pull up the original orchestration, but we have this line. I'll put my highlights in green so we can see the difference. We have a descending line, and we also have a line that's, let's say, the upper, I'll put that in a different color. We have a line that's these upper notes. And they're working together. And then they meet. Yeah? And this, in the orchestra, is probably still being played by 2 instruments. So, could be horns or winds or something, and then both sections meet on a single pitch. And so in an attempt to show some of that orchestration, the arranger has kept the stem direction separated. And that can affect our interpretation of it too, because now we see that there's another melody here. Yeah. So how do we bring that out? Do we choose to bring it out? Yeah. So yeah, Internet Privacy Advocates just said it's for 2 different timbre instruments. Exactly. So that is the case for that particular bar. There would be in let's say modern engraving practice, some of that is starting to go away, which saddens me because I like seeing different things separated out for us. But from talking to various engravers, if the argument is that at the piano, if the pianist isn't required to literally hold the notes, I'll go back, which we're not. This is going to be pedaled. then there's a big push toward eliminating the change in stem direction in modern piano engraving. I don't love that. It would make it easier to read and easier to sight read, but we lose data. We lose information that comes from the original composition. Let's see. Rhodesy asked, I don't have a Discord. No, sorry. This is the best place, here in the comments and at my email. Tan. Oh, you have a question for the open Q&A. Awesome. I will get there. Absolutely, yes. So Craig, jumping over to Craig's next question. On the next page, there are 2 more notes that he's highlighted for us. But same principle. And in general, the answer is the same here. These are going to be different instruments that are sustaining. One thing, especially because Craig, you mentioned that you're self-taught and you're earlier on in your piano re-study of the piano, let's say. One thing that I see that constantly confuses earlier students of piano is when we see a note that's sustained and then it gets played again at the end of the line. And I see a lot of questions online asking about, well, do I hold it or do I play the note again or do I change finger? And it looks very confusing, especially if you've learned to read that this is a dotted half that's held for the entire bar. And we get to the end and say, well, if I lift my finger, then I'm not going to be playing the dotted half note anymore. And the answer is purely that sometimes these stems the stem down means to hold, to physically hold and make finger legato for the duration of the passage. And that is part of what it means in this bar. And even in the next bar as well. But it also doesn't mean that we can't let go when we need to. Okay, so in this first bar, because I don't want to hold the entire vocal line in a single pedal. If I do that and pedal for the whole bar, the whole thing's going to blur. Even if I pedal on the last note, the last eighth, I don't want to do that. I'd rather keep the melody much more clear. So even if that means almost no pedal. So let's say maybe the slightest bit. This is pretty advanced, Craig, but go with me here. The slightest bit of pedal between where our fingers are going to change. So we have 5, 4, 3 that we're using in the right hand. Now, in order to continue playing the melody, I would probably like to use 4 here. And if I don't use any pedal at all, there's going to be a little hiccup as we make that finger transition. And crossing 4 under 3 just doesn't work, and it wouldn't be appropriate at the level that this piece is anyway. So there isn't a great way of navigating around. If we move to 2 instead, now we're out of fingers and we've got 2 more melody notes to play. So if we pedal right where the hand needs to shift, but we're holding our thumb, so let me show you on music again. Pedal goes down and then lifts on the F. And lifts on the F. And then let me show you, we haven't used this camera today, so let me show you here as well. So I'm holding with the thumb, pedal down, pedal up. So there's a combination of techniques being employed, right? A little bit of pedal to help show the sustain of the note and help keep it active. And then we know that once we reach the final point, let's say where this E is approximately, we have to lift the D. We have to lift it up because it has to sound for it to be the melody. So we do our best in the meantime. And then here, this is one thing that I might even change, or if you were my student, I'd have you do something different. I would probably have you let go of that D because it was just in the melody. And if we bring out that note, oh, I didn't show you it all. Let me actually show you on the screen. So I was talking about this top D of the dotted half. If we do play that note, it's a part of the melody here, which means we have to bring it out above the rest of the texture. But then if we hold, we're going to continue to have that high level of resonance, let's say, that distracts from the melody. But if we don't play it at all to begin with, or if we pretend the dotted half note D is not there, and we use the pedal a little bit more advanced, I can let go of that, and I can still hold the bottom B flat and get the sense of harmony that's continuing. Yeah? Thanks, Internet Privacy Advocate. Thanks for tuning in for a bit of the stream today. It's good to see you. And thanks, Steph. I appreciate that. And Sir Wolseley is here. I haven't seen you in a while. Awesome. And Rajat, great. Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. You were probably commenting about the Rachmaninoff sonata that we were talking about earlier. Beautiful. So I think we're going to leave Craig's question there because I think I answered it and went far beyond. But hopefully when Craig tunes back in, that's going to be helpful to you. So thanks for sending that question in. By the way, yes, if there's something, for example, like Rhodesy was tuned in last week, 2 weeks ago on the last stream and had an in-depth question that I couldn't get to. And so I asked just to send me an email about it. Oh, Craig, you're still here. Brilliant. So always feel free, especially because like today's stream, we're already over an hour in and I haven't gotten to open it up for Q&A yet. If there's a question you have, you can always send me an email in between the streams and I'll make sure we tackle it in the next stream. So that's definitely always an option. Oh gosh, there's something I wanted to say at the beginning and I forgot to, but we've got a bunch of people here, so I'm going to say it right now. I have a course on Christmas music that is on sale. It ends at the end of September. So check it out. There's a link in the description below. It's really geared toward intermediate level players to late intermediate. But I've even had some collegiate level students take the course and found still extreme value in it. So you can go check it out. It's on sale for $50 off, only till the end of the month. And then it'll be back to regular price. Okay, now back to our regular programming. So we're going to open it up to, Q&A. I'm going to jump over and back to Tan's question. And then I see we've already got some other ones coming in. So that's great. Okay, Tan's question, ascending or descending scale of tritones. And what's the approach to fingering? Let's see. And he must have left after, because he didn't respond to Internet Privacy Advocate's follow-up question. A descending, ascending, descending scale of tritones. I'm not actually, does anybody have, Tan, I'm sorry, I don't know if I can answer that question because a tritone, I'm going to think of a tritone as more of an arpeggio, right? And not a scale type passage because a tritone is formed of an interval. If it was supposed to be whole tone scale, yeah, I can definitely answer something about a whole tone scale. So, yeah, I'll just do a quick little thing about that, and then we'll move on to the next question. So, let me pull up some blank staff paper for us. Okay. So in a whole tone scale, if we're dealing with C, we have C, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and C, or we could call it B flat. There are two iterations of whole tones. So we have one that begins, let's say, on C, for example, and then we have another that would begin on the other black, on the black key. So if we call that a D flat whole tone, D flat, E flat, F, G. So those are two whole tone scales. They only share. Do they share? They don't share any pitches. Yeah, they're completely separate from one another. So let's talk about a quick right-hand fingering for this. If we know this is our black key group, let's make sure that we have 2, 3, 4 on that. I wonder if this is in a book somewhere. It's got to be in a book somewhere, but I'm just coming up with it as we go through here today. But we want to accomplish all those the black keys in one hand position, and then we'll cross back to 1. Now, if we work backwards from that, we're going to have 1 on E, and then probably 2 and 1. So we have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And that gets us up, and we can play as many octaves as we want. Whoops. Let's see how the other one works. So we're going to need 1. Oh, this is much simpler. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and it would continue on from there. Don't go to 4 like I just did. Same principle, coming up with a fingering for that. Knowing that after a group of black keys, we want the thumb to play. We're going to need the thumb to play to enable a cross. And then building out from those points. Okay, cool. I hope that answers Tan's question. Bachward's fellow thinks, I'd think of whole tone and tritone as very different things, but maybe we answered his question, so thanks for chiming in with that. Let's jump back. Okay. Antonio's had the next question, so I'm just going to go through these in the order they came in, and definitely we'll get to them. So Antonio asked, when you play a VST sampled in minor thirds, can you tell the difference in timbre compared to one sampled with each single note? If the programming is good, probably not. I would say, probably not. I'm not aware of any sample libraries that have been, let's say, if you're talking about minor thirds being sampled together or something like that, that seems a little strange, because we would have, it would be maybe impossible to build out sympathetic resonance the right way. So if that's the case, if there are minor thirds being played together, I'd say yes, you'd be able to hear a difference, because the sympathetic resonance that should be in the instrument will end up changing. So the depth that we feel will change when we play notes on the finished library that have minor thirds. But then if we don't play notes, or if we play notes that don't have minor thirds, there'll be a change. So that's my answer to that question. I think, though, the really good sample libraries, it's not just notes that are sampled, but they'll have a single strike, and then there'll be strikes with the pedal down that are sampled to get the sympathetic resonance, and how they're all programmed together is super complicated, super complex. Sparrow's question, and Steph just chimed in that it's very interesting. Sparrow asked, what do you do when you have to sneeze during a recital? the beautiful thing about being human and having emotions is that there's usually so much happening on stage and you're feeling so many other things. I have never had to sneeze in a performance in, I don't know, thousands probably. I've never had an urge to sneeze. I've never had to stifle a sneeze. It's never happened. And I think it's because, especially the fight or flight type of reaction happens if we have any anxiety about playing, which 99.9% of people do. And when that reaction is turned on in the body says everything else is not important except getting through this moment. If for some reason, let's say I was so comfortable that that reaction didn't happen, I would probably, well, one, you have to keep playing. You cannot stop. And I would probably just hold the sneeze in. It would happen and it would be audible and you just keep going. Has anybody ever been in a performance where you've heard the artist sneeze? That's super interesting. I've not heard an artist sneeze on stage, and I have never needed to sneeze on stage. Dith says you sing and you've had to sneeze. I've seen singers have just some really random stuff happen on stage that, I mean, looking back is funny, but it's probably horrifying to live through. There was one singer I was watching perform, and she had a fly in her mouth mid-phrase while her mouth was open, soprano singing some beautiful art song, and they had to restart they restarted the piece, not the whole set, but she had to leave the stage for sure and come back recomposed. That was very interesting. And oh yeah, Dith, you said burping too. That I can say I have sung a little bit in public, and that can be a thing. I understand that for sure, especially when you're really sucking in enough air to sing well and sing some long phrases. Yeah, that's not fun. Rosie says, I heard it's lethal if you can hold in a sneeze because it leaves your body extremely fast. I hold my sneezes in all the time, and it's never sent me to the hospital yet. But I've been told not to do that. But, you know, sometimes you just can't. You just can't let it out. I'm sure we all know those occasions. Oh, to sneeze with your eyes open? I've never tried that. I don't even know if it's humanly possible to keep your eyes open and sneeze. There's such a strong instinct to close them. Yeah. Let's see. Jumping back. Dith says you have your first test coming up, RCM level 4, and you could use some memorization tips. Great. Okay, Dith, a couple things for you to think about. You probably have a couple pieces to perform on the program, right? Like maybe 3 or something that are part of the exam. I would practice starting a performance with any of the 3. So there's one tip. 2, have built-in places in a single piece that you can jump to. So 3 pieces and 2 etudes. Well, we'll call that maybe 5 pieces then. Depending on what the etudes are. Dith, what are the etudes? Okay, we'll definitely call that a piece. I'm not sure even how to pronounce that name. Loshorn. The Loshorn etude in E minor. So when I say have points in our piece where we can skip around and jump to, this is Mozart's Sonata in G, which we all know. Right? Okay. We, of course, are used to practicing from the beginning. Yeah. So we have this point. I'm just going to label them with little brackets to start with. We should also practice starting at other points in the piece, being able to perform from specific measures. So the next one we might pick will be the middle of bar 16. Right? So let's practice being able to start the phrase right from that point. And then going further, can we start right in 23? And then continue on. Every piece of music, and I'm going, let's say, this is pretty, I'm leaving a lot of gaps. But if our piece is relatively short, maybe if we build in, let's say, a couple points to be able to jump to. This serves two purposes. In our practice, we can, one, we're going to build in really, really comfortable phrases in our music, because everywhere that we start our practice is going to become very comfortable. The more of those we can build in, the better. And eventually, if we can make every single measure a comfortable place, the chances of us having a memory problem become not zero, but close to zero. Yeah? So start by, and the other thing I like to advise is actually go from the end of the piece and then work back to the beginning. So we build in, maybe 8 measures from the end or 4 measures from the end. We play from there to the end, and we practice starting from there to the end, and then 8 measures to the end. And I usually number these backwards. So the end of the piece gets number 1, and then 8 bars before that gets number 2, and so on, backwards and backwards and backwards, until we get to the beginning of the piece where we practiced a lot. And Bethany says, having spots to jump to is a lifesaver. Yeah. And you say you blanked on a performance of Scriabin's Sonata Fantasy and having numerous start points. Absolutely. Yeah. I blanked in a competition, in a big competition, playing Chopin's Etude, Opus 10, number 1. It's a funny story, and it's actually, I'll tell it because it could be anything can happen on stage to cause a memory lapse or this instant loss of focus, or like we have no idea where to go. And I was playing a Bosendorfer Imperial in the competition, and it had, that like octave of extra keys. And of course, Opus 10 number 1 is full of octaves in the left hand. That's pretty much all it is in the left hand is octaves, while the right hand does all the gymnastics. And I was somewhere about halfway through, and I looked down to play an octave in my left hand, and there was so much extra like visual information that I was not used to seeing that I had no idea what the next octave was supposed to be, because it looked completely foreign. And so I thought, I don't know, if I have no idea. And instead of guessing and playing something horribly dissonant and really awful sounding, I jumped almost instantly. It was very fast. You could tell that there was a slight pause, but I realized as I was coming down the arpeggio with my right hand, and my left hand was looking, and it was no idea. And so I just jumped to a new phrase forward in the piece. So that brings up another good thing that Bethany kind of brought up. We never want to jump backward. Don't ever jump backward. Because once you make a mistake in performance, I don't really know anybody that that has enough mental strength to not let the problem cause another problem the second time around. So we always end up getting afraid again, or more anxious when we approach the point where we had an issue or a memory problem. So we want to avoid having to go through that again. Yeah. So always jump forward. Rosie says Arthur Rubinstein did that with Chopin's Second Sonata. I think not only did he do that, but I think he made up a bunch of stuff in the middle. And I've seen some performers where it doesn't always sound great. Some of them can do a remarkable improvisation if you really know harmony well. This is way beyond level 4 RCM, but I mean, as a professional, and maybe Bethany, if you know harmony really well and you know how harmony is functioning for the piece that you're playing, Scriabin is incredibly complicated, but if you have a sense of that, you can also build something, you can improv something that helps to join the two parts together. Let's say you know your next phrase begins and it's a D major chord that we need to get to, and we need some way in the style of cadencing and arriving back in D major, and our mind is going a million miles a minute trying to make that happen. That's another thing, but that's really a skill in itself. That requires a lot of knowledge of harmony and improv. Yeah. So Dith, you can think about that for the future. But if you start working on some of that now, while repertoire isn't so incredibly harmonically complex, like the Scriabin that Bethany brought up, that will lead right into being able to do more harmonically complex things more easily as you get to them. Well, let's see here. We have questions from Hector. Let me make sure before I jump down, because I was just finishing up Dith's question about memorizing. I think those are my main tips, Dith. One more. Practice performing from being cold, let's say. So don't practice. You can practice performing and doing run-throughs in the middle of your practice session, but try to find a time later on to sit down. You don't get to play any scales or arpeggios. You don't get to warm up at all, and you have to launch into one of your pieces of repertoire. And try to start with each one from that kind of cold place. That's also going to really help, because even anytime we're taking a test or competing or anything like that, there's always going to be an amount of downtime between the last time we've played and when we have to go out and play for the exam or perform. Even for professionals, there's always a time between, well, this is, I guess, yeah, there's still always a time. Maybe it's less so, but you walk off stage and you don't have a piano anymore. And it might be 2 or 3 hours before the recital is going to start. Some venues have green rooms and they have a piano in there that you can warm up on again and practice on. Some venues don't. And so you have to be comfortable sitting down after 3 hours not playing anything and starting with your first piece on the program. So we can practice that. Yeah. So let's say you do practicing in the morning or like in the early afternoon. Come back 3 or 4 hours later after not touching the piano, not thinking about your music, and sit down and jump straight in. That would be my third tip. And best of luck to you, Dith, with your test. We hope it goes really well. Let us know how it goes. We would love to hear, for sure. And, gosh, maybe you don't want feedback right now, but we still haven't heard you play on the live stream, Dith, and we'd love to hear you play. So feel free to send in a recording sometime. Okay. Sir Wolseley, let's see. Rhodesy says, can I email you my progression on the revised version? Yeah, feel free to email. Yes, Rhodesy. See, Seth had a question. We're wondering if you go into a bit of detail about in and out motion while playing scales. Yeah. Okay. Let's start with something that's relatively simple and straightforward and build on that. So, if we're playing in B major, from being around the channel, I love B major. In B major, our hand is placed in a perfect position. I'll play it up an octave maybe. It's placed in a perfect position where we have little to no in and out movement to do on the keys, right? Our thumb is having to play a little bit further into the key maybe than typical for a white key major or a white key minor scale. But because of this, the hand does not have to do any moving in and out. Everything stays right here. 1 and 2 and 3 all play in one group. 1, 2, 3, and 4 play in one group. And we can see that there's nothing, we don't need to pull the hand in various directions. It stays in one place. That's one of the things that makes D major so great. Okay? Any scale that's going to have a lot of black keys, we probably should be finding a fingering that enables that. D flat major. Same thing, there's very little in and out motion because we're allowing the hand to stay at the edge of the black keys. And the thumb, the hand is elevated enough that the thumb has room to pass underneath. Yep. Where this starts to become more of a problem is in scales like C major, ironically. So in C major, we're going to begin far outside the keys, to the edge. And then as we need to cross, do you see how the wrist has to come up and move from outside the key in to allow the thumb to play? And then we continue moving out and in, and out and in, and out and in. Now, the faster we need to play this, maybe the less of that motion we're going to do, but we're limited because we cannot allow our fingers to go in between the black keys. That'll be the death of us. So we can play a little bit higher, but there's still a sense of out and in and out and in. Okay? And this is all determined by, it's determined by really the thumb and where it needs to go in order to play the next note of the scale. And once our thumb has navigated this and played F, well, now we can see the hand is much further in. And if I just drop the fingers, they're between the black keys, between F sharp, G sharp, etc. So then immediately, on the way into the next note, we pull back. We pull the hand back again to allow 2 and 3 and 4 to play in a more optimal position. So that is part of the motion that's always happening whenever you see somebody playing a scale, especially a scale that's mostly white keys. There is this motion in the wrist happening. And it's not there to facilitate, let's say, it's not there because we need to stay loose. It's a good byproduct that if we maintain fluidity in the wrist, that's good for our playing. But it's really there to facilitate allowing the thumb to do the job it has to. Now, the faster we go, they become little flicks. They're still there, but that's why sometimes if you look at concert pianists, when we talk about technique, you watch a concert pianist play something and you say, well, it doesn't look like they're doing it. It's because the technique has become made so efficient and it's become so small. It's still present and they feel it, but it's almost imperceptible by the eye and by a camera. So let's see, that was from Seth. Seth, I hope that answers your question a bit. So we only use in and out motion as needed, yeah? Sometimes it's very necessary to get the hand in the right place. Other times, if we're using it incorrectly and we're doing too much in and out, or we stay, especially if we stay too far into the keys and we don't allow ourselves to come out of the keys, we're going to put ourselves in very awkward places, depending on the passage in particular. So that's kind of it's on a case-by-case basis, let's say, yeah? So it's really easy to talk about when we know exactly the notes and what the hand has to do. It's hard to make a general statement. So he said, one thing I'm not sure of is where you stop moving in and start moving out. The in motion is part of, and it should be built into, our playing through 2 and 3. So thumb plays, as 2 plays, the wrist is starting to move up and allowing thumb. Yeah. So 2, 3, and it's a part of that playing with the second and third finger. If we really want to, if we don't want to make it all happen right at the last second. If we wait and we play 1, 2, 3, now we're going to have to do a big lift and release in for F. And we don't want that to happen, right? So let's say when we initialize movement, we drop in with thumb, the wrist is low. Then we play 2, the wrist starts to kind of make a semicircle and it's going to lift out in this direction. That begins on second finger and then continues through third finger. And then in a sense we drop with the thumb, but it's not like a drop like that with a lot of weight, and we don't want to break the wrist. The thumb just lets the wrist drop back into, let's say, neutral. So wrist comes up, thumb plays, it drops back to neutral. up, drop back to neutral, up, drop back to neutral, and up. So you say you think you're moving during the thumb as well. If the wrist stays high for the thumb, it's very difficult to play because the thumb isn't very long. So we can't do that. And if the wrist stays in and drops, we're going to be in the wrong position for fingers 2, 3, 4 to continue up the scale. So that's why we need both components. As the wrist comes up, it goes in naturally. As it drops, we need to be aware of pulling it back out and not just drop from where we end up, because that's the difference. If you see the difference between being too far in the key and in the correct place to continue on with the scale. Yeah, great follow-up question. Thanks for that, Seth. Okay, let's jump back. Sir Wolsey had a question, so let's hit that. This will be a pretty quick one, I think. And then we'll be able to jump down into some of the more recent ones from Hector and Shintan and Ricardo. Beautiful. Well, hello to all of you, by the way. If I haven't gotten to say hello to you, welcome. Sir Wolsey's question, he says, my piano really can't hold its tune. I had it tuned at the end of July and it's already very bad. And what do people do in these cases? So there are a couple basic things we can do, Sir Wolsey, that are, let's say, probably less expensive than having the tuner out again, although that's going to be really important. One, always keeping the piano at constant temperature, constant humidity is important. It's more important that those are constant and lesser important that they're a specific amount. It is important if we're really being picky. I think we want the piano to be around 40% humidity, especially at the soundboard and the tuning block. That's optimal. You can buy a system called the Damp Chaser Piano Lifesaver system, and that's fabulous at keeping the correct humidity near the components of the piano that need it, especially near the soundboard. And if we keep that humidity near the soundboard, it keeps the crown of the soundboard, which keeps the rim, it keeps the pressure correct, which keeps the rim in the right shape. I'm not talking about, these aren't big shifts, but for example, if the rim of a piano spreads the width of a business card, that's it. If it spreads the width of a business card, the soundboard will completely lose its crown. So it can't move very far before the instrument is in bad shape. So keeping humidity there is really important. So there's an option. You can buy a damp chaser system for an upright. And then you would fill that with water. It keeps the humidity at the correct place. It also includes dehumidifiers so that the area around the piano, if you live in a really humid environment, maintains the amount of dryness that it needs as well. Temperature is the same. Pianos are all made out of wood, right? Just about the whole instrument is wooden. Wood changes with temperature and humidity. The more we can regulate the temperature and humidity, the less change we're going to allow the wood to have. The higher the humidity, the more wood expands, right? And I think temperature is the same way. The higher the temperature, the more wood expands. The lower both of those are, the more wood contracts. And when we're talking about the size of a business card, the width of a business card, or that much change to have a dramatic impact, we can't allow the wood to move very much. Okay. So you can control humidity with a system like that. You can control temperature, hopefully, in your space, just with thermostat, etc., right? Don't, in the wintertime, if we're coming up on winter, for those of you coming up on winter, don't use like a spot heater near the piano because they're going to suck all the humidity out of the air. We might regulate temperature, but we're going to make it extremely dry. Okay. Next up for taking care of the piano. The more often you have the piano tuned, the more likely it is that it's going to stay in tune in the future. Not because you're regularly having the tuner out, but because you are training the strings to hold a certain amount of tension. Yuri, yes, you can ask a question. I'm just a little bit behind in the chat, but I will get to it. Yes. Hello, Yuri. So the more we have a piano tuned, a like for example, I have my instrument tuned probably 6 to 8 times a year. And it's due for a tuning, which it sounds pretty good. But it's starting to go out of tune, especially across registers, yeah? But unisons are still really good. So the more we have the piano tuned, the more the strings are going to stay in the tension that they're pulled into, and the less likely it's going to be that they're going to want to fall back to where they were previously trained. So if, for example, I know that you have a pre-owned instrument, Sir Woolsey, if previously it wasn't tuned regularly, or if it was tuned like once a year or once every 2 years, the strings are probably very used to sitting in an out-of-tune tension. And so they're immediately, as soon as the tuner comes, they're immediately trying to pull themselves or release themselves back to that place. Just physics and elasticity. So we want to train the bends in the string to be more aligned with proper tuning. That happens just by having the piano tuned a lot. So new instruments are usually recommended by dealers to be tuned like 4 times a year in the first year when they come into the home for that purpose. Keep the piano, immediately keep it in tune better, and all of the strings are going to hold that tension for a longer time. And then after that, you're not going to have to have it tuned as much. So you might consider, I know this is expensive, but you might consider having like a monthly appointment with your piano tuner to come out and re-pull everything into tune very quickly. And Sir Woolsey, the more you go from the center, the worse the tuning is. That is very common. That's very, very common. As the seasons change, that's always the time when pianos tend to lose tune the most. And it's usually, I think, the bass goes flat and the treble goes sharp. That happens on every instrument. The degree to which it happens will be dependent on how well trained your strings are. So that's the next step. And I wouldn't kind of half go down that road. I'd either commit to it fully or just don't. If we go halfway, we're going to spend a decent amount of money and we're not going to get a good result. Yeah. And Sir Woolsey, more tuning, but tuning in a shorter period of time because we have to break the habits of the strings. It's just like practicing, right? When we learn something wrong, we have to do extra work in a concise way and efficient way to break the pattern that we established. So in physics, the strings are doing the same thing. We need to break that. We need to break the tension that, not break the strings, but break the tension that they want to resolve to and reset it to the correct tension. Sometimes some techs can do that. If your strings are in good enough shape, you can pull the piano a little sharp, and then as it starts to settle, it will start to settle closer and closer to correct tune. But especially if you had to have the piano pitch raised, which usually happens, I think, if pianos are more than like a tenth of a pitch or so out of tune or flat. If you had to have that happen, it's always instantly bad. No matter how fantastic your instrument is, it's instantly out of tune, like in a week, in days. So when pianos need that, usually tuners will come out and say, you need a pitch raise, I'll pitch raise it today, I'll put it a little sharp and make an appointment in a month, and I'll come back and do a proper tuning. Because putting it straight in tune it's just going to fall out of tune again. All right. Let's jump back to, I think we're on Hector. Hector's question. Well, it's good to see you, Hector. Hector says you were recovering from eye surgery, so I hope that recovery is going well. Am I familiar with Spanish repertoire, like Albanese, Granados? I haven't played a ton of it. Was it Granados? I can't remember. I don't think it was Granados. I've played some, and I have students play some of that rep occasionally. It sounds like maybe you're requesting some tutorials on some of that stuff. I will definitely consider it, because you said it's hard to find good tutorials online. Yeah. I'll see what I can put out, because some of that's going to be very, very advanced, And if that's what you're into, then it'll take me some time to learn that rep to begin with. But especially some of the granados that he wrote more for student study, I might be able to put some tutorials out like that fairly quickly. But some of that other rep is usually reserved for, not reserved, but you usually are going to find concert pianists playing it after they've played a tremendous amount of like your standard repertoire. That's part of the reason why there isn't a lot online out there about it, because it's usually just not tackled until you've played a ton of Beethoven and a ton of Chopin and things like that. But it's still beautiful music. Let's see. Shinton asked, hi, does 4-part harmony work in pop music? I've been studying in school but can't find the use of it while producing pop songs. Yeah, 4-part harmony definitely can be used in pop music. Think of like Bach chorales, or if you're writing, let's say, homophonic 4-part harmony. Super useful, because what it ends up coming down to is what we would call chord voicing in pop music. So if we need to write, a D major chord, and we want to write it like that because that is part writing, having great voice leading and voicings of chords is going to be really important. So think about if we have, let's say, if you're in pop music and you're working with a synth part and then your bass is separate, like 2 separate instruments, we'll have our bass maybe playing, let's just for simplicity's sake say roots, and we can have a synth playing in nice 4-part harmony in whatever inversion that we have that we need. This is not a pop progression at all. Let me see if I can come up with one. Oh, there we go. Back to D7. So what was that? B minor 7 to an E7 at 9 to that's nice. That's different than what I played last time. That's an A. Yeah, we'll call it an A7 with a lot of upper extensions, and then resolving to D major 7. So if we know 4-part harmony, we break some of the rules of it, but we write in close, let's say closest position, we're going to write really nice voice leading from part to part, right? That's how I got through that and did that, was really just a knowledge of chords, and second chord was E7. So moving between those two, there's only a movement of 1 pitch, but that totally works in 4-part writing, and then movement of a couple pitches. And if you want to get more experimental, you can move the top voice around, yeah? But definitely, if you think about it that way, I think it would help for sure. Oh, you mean writing for different instruments? Do you make sure that during every harmonic change there are less thirds in the chord? No, probably not. That'll come down to a timbral quality for you and a choice, because even if you look at some great classical music, composers that knew all the rules of harmony, there are plenty of places where they disobey the rules on purpose, yeah? And it's for a tonal outcome that they want. They want the listener to perceive something a certain way. Now, if we over-exaggerate the root of a chord, that's going to have a certain tonality, and maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. Most of the time, it probably won't. If we over-exaggerate the third of a chord in a pop song, it'll end up sounding more like it's in inversion rather than being incorrect. So it depends on the instruments, and it depends on a lot of your production and what you're doing. So partly use your ears, and that's partly why the harmonic training is good and understanding 4-part writing, because if we understand why it sounds good when we avoid doubling of notes or doubling of notes in incorrect places. Then we know, our ears know what to listen to. Let's say we've got a production and there's, 5 roots being played and 4 thirds being played across a register or things like that. Well, it's no longer as simple as 4 parts. And all of a sudden, the density of the texture of one instrument can outweigh, just because, let's say, we have fewer thirds in a chord. If one of the instruments is a massive texture, that's going to outweigh the number of thirds that you've put in the chord. So our ears need to be trained to listen for that sound, the incorrect sound, and know what that sounds like. Yeah. And then you can fix it. And you can say, well, if I've got this massive layered square wave synth playing something, then there might only be one pitch that synth, that is in all of the rest of your orchestration or in all of the rest of your writing. That's the only instrument that gets that note, maybe. And if it's the third of the chord, maybe everything else plays 1 and 5, purely because of the texture. Yeah. And in film scoring and orchestral writing, yeah, you're gonna find that, especially writing for strings, for example, if you write really well voiced and with good voice leading string parts, those are going to sound really nice. And if you're going to have them ever played by a live orchestra, the players are going to thank you a lot. The last thing any orchestral string player wants to do is play lines of chords that are just jumping around that have no melodic meaning. So they're going to play much more expressively for you if you give every line a melody. Even though they might be functioning harmonically together as a section, if you keep their interest, they're going to play better for you. That was a great question. Okay, let's see. I'm going to try to get through everything else that's come in the meantime, but we're going to have to wrap up pretty soon here. And Ricardo, thank you so much. If Ricardo is still here, thank you for your comment. I appreciate that. Rhodesy, we were talking about scales, and you said, funny, with C major, your left hand only goes up in 1 and 2. That's good practice, but we can definitely get more efficient than that. But it's a neat thing to have under our fingers, because there's probably a lot of people that can't play a C major scale with only 1 and 2. Okay, let's see. I think we're getting close to the bottom here. Let's see. Diff had another question. You said, do you ever find yourself hitting multiple white keys that are next to each other by mistake? Seems to happen a lot. Is that something that goes away with experience? With practice, let's say, yes, it goes away. And let's see. I'm trying to figure out how long I want to spend on this question. Okay, it looks like this might be one of the final questions. So, okay, I'll spend a little bit of time on this. An approach that I found that works really well for avoiding wrong keys or avoiding, let's say, splatting 2 notes together or something like that. This was, I wish I could remember the teacher's name. This is not my idea. This is something I learned 20-some years ago because I was having the same problem. They recommended imagining like you have little needles coming out, or like paper clips, whatever, coming out of your fingertip, right in the middle of your fingertip. So we have this very, very tiny contact point, minuscule, almost microscopic contact point. So instead of thinking about our entire pad of our finger playing a note, in which case, if I play that, then my finger takes up more than half of the width of the key. That's not very precise. But if I think that the point, and especially we can even play and feel the point in our finger where that balance happens, if we imagine that it's a very precise point on the fingertip, and that point on the fingertip we're going to put precisely in the middle of the key. And we practice with that focus, and all fingers, of course. We are instantly going to have a lot more, instantly is the wrong word. We're very quickly going to have a lot more precise or precision in our playing, precise playing. So that's something you can think about. The downside of this, two downsides. One, there becomes a tendency to over curl the fingers because we're thinking about that one precise point. So we have to resist the temptation of over curl because that adds tension to the mechanism. So we don't want to do that. We also, this is more of a, it'll open up a whole can of worms, but we're going to go there anyway. If we think about the finger as being such a small contact point, we can also affect our tone color at the instrument, and it can become thinner and not as deep and rich. So, like a lot of practice at the piano, we need to practice in balance and in opposites. So as we spend time practicing with this ultra focus on precision and on the middle of the key and where that is, and precisely placing our fingers there when necessary, we also need to practice feeling like we're still playing with the full pad of the finger. Because when we play with the full pad of the finger, we're going to have a warmer and more rounded tone than if we over curl and we're playing on little pins and needles, in a sense, right? So our tone will thin in that kind of practice, and we don't want to overdo that kind of practice. But it can be great, especially if used for, let's say, a passage or two in particular where there's always a problem with precision. You can try thinking about it that way. Oh, great. So welcome, Ryan, and welcome, username. So I think we just have a couple more questions. Yuri had asked, well, I appreciate Yuri, your friend, recommending the channel. Do I know Joe? I might know Joe. I'm not going to ask you to put a last name in the chat, but if they said they know me, they probably know me. So I appreciate it, and I appreciate you joining in and watching today. That's great. Okay, so going through the questions, I think our next question is from Ryan. Oh, Jess, you said you just looked up canned worms. You really took that and ran with it, Jess. So Ryan asks, what's the difference between tonal and atonal harmony, and do you need to learn the latter? That depends on your goal in music. If you're going to go to music school and you'd like to go to music school, then yeah, learning atonal music. Atonal music can mean, gosh, it means a wide variety of contemporary composition. So tonal music, let's just summarize real quick. Tonal music is traditional. You want to go into film scoring. You'll want to learn a little bit about atonal music, and you'll want to learn about techniques of chord clusters and writing not in a tonal center occasionally. But the majority of film scoring is going to be tonal. So what is tonal music? Tonal music revolves around what we'd usually call a key. When we're comparing tonal and atonal, it revolves around a key center. So if we're in G major, we have a tonality that is home, that's very consonant. And then we have diatonic harmony and all the rules about it that help harmony function around that tonal center. That's why we can have 12 major keys and 12 minor keys. When the tonal center is removed, harmonic function starts to fall apart, or at least in the traditional sense, it starts to fall apart. So atonal music, some of the common types of atonal music are going to be serial music, not cereal like breakfast food, but with an S. So serial music or 12-tone music. In 12-tone music, we have each individual tone within an octave. There are 12 of those, right? They are all equal. And 12-tone composers, if you want to go and look up like Schoenberg, 12-tone composers are going to build their own relationships among the tones. And in many cases, each piece will have a different set of relationships. It's one of the things that makes learning and playing 12-tone music very difficult, is that it doesn't function anything like standard harmony. We don't see chord shapes that look anything like standard harmony. And of course, our ears are then required to become familiar with some extremely, what we'd consider dissonant sounding stuff by tonal standards. But 12-tone music is, in a sense, highly mathematical. So we create our tone rows, and then we build melodies out of our predetermined sequences of tones. And those will all just be numbered 1 through 12. So your tone, a melody, you might choose to play, I can't probably keep track of all 12 in one, but something like that. I may have missed 1 or 2 in there. I was trying to go through all 12 pitches without repeating any. So that might be a tone row. And then we continue to build and manipulate our tone row in various ways and add more components around it that function according to the row that we predetermined was going to be the focus of our music. That's 12-tone music. In maybe a more immediately practical sense for you, Ryan, if you learn about tone clusters and like polytonality, that might be more important. Because if, let's say you're scoring something eventually and it needs to be very dramatic and creepy or something, we might need multiple tone clusters and know how they're working together and how we're going to build them. Yeah. So what I just did was I honestly picked a pedal tone, and now I'm stacking harmonically opposite chords against one another. So a minor triad in root position with a major triad in root position a few seconds apart. Yeah. Here are 2 major triads. And in a sense, we're so used to hearing some of this stuff these days that sounds more like suspension, and this sounds more like release, if we're just talking about those 2. So you might want to look into something like that, or look into how we could have, if we're just talking about at the piano, one hand functioning in one tonality, another hand functioning in another tonality. Or if you're scoring and it's easier to see scoring-wise, maybe your strings are functioning in one tonality and your horns and winds are functioning in a different key. And then we're combining keys. It's no longer really tonal music because we're disobeying the laws of tonality. But we're creating other effects out of it, which can be really cool, and you hear a lot in modern film composition. Cool, that was a fun question. Yeah, I think, did I get through everything? I think I see that there's been continual discussion about Sir Wolsey's piano, so that's great. I don't think I missed anybody's question. Did I miss anybody's question? Let me know if I did, and I will make sure and hit it before we call it a day today. Yeah, this has been a great stream. Thanks everybody that's been here today. This has been a lot of fun. We've had a lot of really great stuff to talk about. A lot of composition questions, which is awesome. Different than the technique that we usually talk about on the streams, but I love it. Cool. 2 last things then before we wrap up. 1, if you haven't hit the like button, please hit the like button. And secondly, if you haven't checked out the course that's linked in the description, my Christmas course is on sale for just another 5 days. So if you want to pick up a copy of that, it's on sale for $50 off in the description. You can check that out. And yeah, I'd appreciate it. Becky says, great stuff. And we live on the beach, so always interesting humidity. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Awesome. Okay. So in the meantime, I think because this month is just 4 weeks, we've got a stream in 2 weeks. So second Wednesday of October, we'll have our next stream. As always, feel free to send in any stuff if you want some feedback on any of your playing or composition or any questions you have like that. Feel free to send in some material and we'll take a look at it in the next stream. If you have questions and you're not going to be able to tune in, feel free to email me a question or two. Well, let's say, a question. How about that? Feel free to email me a question and we'll try to get to it pronto in the next stream. No, Rhodesy, we definitely keep doing streams. I just only do 2 a month. I do 2 a month. So the next one is in 2 weeks. They're always on Wednesdays. I actually have something else that goes on the first Wednesday of the month, every month. So I can never do that. And then I need a little bit of a break on the third Wednesday. So that's why it's structured that way. So second and fourth Wednesday of the month, every month, we'll always have a stream here. And so how about I'll see you. Yeah, Sparrow, please send in something for next time. Absolutely. Absolutely. And thanks everybody for the great questions. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for, I think there was 1 or 2 more likes that came in. So thanks to those of you that clicked the like button. And Oh, Rhodesy, looks like Rhodesy has 1 more question. I'll take 1 more. Thanks, Sir Wolseley. Thanks for tuning in. 1 more question from Rhodesy, and then we're going to call it a day. I have to get my coffee, Rhodesy. Yes, Sparrow, you said it probably right at the same time. So yes, Rhodesy, you said your left hand fingering for scales. You do fingers 1 and 2 when going up in C and rarely use 4 and 5. I would definitely work on that. 1 and 2 is a great skill to have, but we definitely want to work on being able to play with 4 and 5. In scales, in arpeggios, wherever we start. Yeah, so C major for sure. And if you don't have a problem using fingers like that, for example, starting on 4 and B major. We got to start on 4 and B major, yeah? That's the only way we can really get through it and have the rest of our finger crosses in the right place. Something that might help lead you in that direction is do some chromatic scale practice. So that's instead of between 1 and 2, we're mostly between 1 and 3. So starting on C, 1, 3 on D flat, 1, 3, and then 2, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 2, 1. So anytime we have a group of 2 white keys, we're going to use second finger and thumb. So in a sense, we're still kind of using 1 and 2 to navigate the keyboard, but we're getting used to also incorporating 3. Right hand works the same way. But where the white key groups are shared, 2 and 1 are opposite of one another. So in the right hand, it's 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2. Backwards Fellow says, Hannon has the fingerings for all the major and minor scales. Yeah, if you don't have a copy, that's a great place to look for it. You could probably find, without buying the book, you could probably also find them online super, super easily for free. Or find a copy of the book on imslp.org. It sounds, Rosie, it sounds like you know the fingerings that you should use. We just need to spend some time practicing them. And go slowly. 1 hand at a time in your scales, especially ones that you're not used to doing that sort of fingering with. Hands separately, go slowly, and we'll start to program them in. Feel free if you want to, we never really talk, well, we talk about scale technique, but we never talk about it in relation to like watching a video of somebody playing. So if you want to send in a video of yourself and ask some questions about that, that would also be great. Because there's a lot. Sometimes there are some private lessons I teach that scale talk is 45 minutes because one thing unlocks another thing, and then another door opens, and then we find out this component of technique isn't being utilized correctly, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot to dive into, even though scales are, like the building block of technique and in a sense, harmony. But there's a tremendous amount to dive into there. So, okay, let's wrap it up for today. And once again, thanks to everybody. I know a handful of people have tuned out since I was wrapping up last time. So that's all good. As always, practice smarter, not harder. I'll see you next time. And I'll look forward to seeing you all next time and hopefully seeing some people play some new music. So, okay. Take care, everybody. Have a great week and a great weekend. See you in 2 weeks.